Your boy, DL47 for real all day, AMV and pop-off. Popping off as much rugby league information as possible. Right now, continuing with the first games waiver team series up to the Penrith Panthers, and so you don't miss any essential rugby league information watching this video in its entirety, as per always. So, Penrith Panthers entering the comp in the year 1967, and so did Cronulla Sharks. We already did Cronulla Sharks first of the game. They lost to East 11-5, 1967 round 1, end up with the wooden spoon. And Penrith lost their first ever game to Canterbury, 15 points to 12 at Belmore, 1967 round 1. And Penrith ending up second last in 1967, and they only avoided the wooden spoon because they did in fact beat Cronulla twice over the course of the season, which we'll get to soon enough in a few minutes. So, Penrith's first ever game played at Belmore Sports Ground against Canterbury, refereed by Les Samuelson. The crowd 10,250 people, and the date the 2nd of April 1967. And for Canterbury, a try scored by Bob Hagan and 6 goals kicked by George Talforth. That was 15 points. George Talforth, just one of many times that mentioned him. Just one of many times that George Talforth won the game for Canterbury with his excellent goal kicking. He was one of their greatest ever players, won them stacks of games over the years with his brilliant goal kicking. So at the time, tries were 3 points. That's why 1 try and 6 goals was 15 pots. While for Penrith, 2 tries and 3 goals makes 12 points. So the two tries by Laurie Fagan, and then the 3 goals by Bob Landers. So Laurie Fagan, Penrith's first ever official try scorer, and Bob Landers, Penrith's first ever official goal kicker. 2 tries by Laurie Fagan and 3 goals by Bob Landers, 1967 round 1. And that was their 12 points when they lost to Canterbury 15-12 at Belmore Sports Ground. And Bob Landers needs a special mention too, because before Penrith were in the comp, 7 years prior, in 1960, Bob Landers was at Roosters, and he played in the 1960 grand final, which Roosters lost to St George 31-6, but Bob Landers got the 3 penalty goals for them in said grand final. So, good to see that he was now getting goals at a new team in Penrith. So, Penrith, at times in 1967, they played excellent at times. Every now and then, they'd pull off a great win or a really hard-fought draw. One of the wins in particular I absolutely can't believe, which we'll get to. But most of the time, they were falling short. They just weren't getting the job done. It was only their first year, forgive them. They were trying really hard. They just hadn't worked out how to do things properly, how to make things click yet, so to speak. And they found life a struggle a great deal in 1967, and so did Cronulla. But at least Penrith did beat Cronulla twice to give them the wooden spoon, and Penrith avoided it. But it wasn't long until Penrith got some wooden spoons. They got the wooden spoon in 1973 and again in 1980. And it took poor old Penrith 18 years. It took them up to 1985 just to make the finals for the first time. So, yeah, tough going indeed early on. But for 1967 in particular, from the 22 games, Penrith had scored 203 points. So they're struggling with their attack. That's less than 10 points per game. And they conceded 352. So the for and against minus 149. But despite these disturbing statistics, negative statistics, sometimes they could pull off a monumental win. And in 1967 round 2, Penrith got their first ever win and beat Newtown Jets 16-10 at Penrith Park. So their first ever win and their first ever home win. 1967 round 2, Penrith 16, Newtown 10 at Penrith Park. And Penrith Park, it's basically Penrith Stadium. It's the same place where Penrith Stadium is now. Just back then it was a park, it didn't have any grandstands yet, it wasn't a stadium yet, just a park, but it's the same thing. And then, this is what I absolutely can't believe. This, Penrith's next win, 1967 round 4, this must be the biggest upset I've ever seen in all my years going for all these ancient rugby league stats. This has to be the biggest upset I've ever seen, ever. Somehow, believe it or not, 1967 round 4, Penrith managed to beat St George Dragons of all teams 24-12 at Penrith. And everyone watching, give them a round of applause, right? Give them a gigantic round of applause. Because this was 1967. St George Dragons had just won 11 straight grand finals. Every year, from 1956 all the way up to 1966, counted up, St George won 11 straight grand finals, and then Penrith, the new kids on the block, playing only their 4th game ever, somehow managed to knock off the 11-time champions, 24 points to 12 in 1967 round 4. So, yeah, whether you're a Penrith fan or not, that deserves a gigantic round of applause. Like I said, sometimes they could pull off a brilliant win like that, but most of the time they struggled and didn't get the job done. And after this unbelievable, monumental, king-size, gigantic, monstrous upset over St George, in round 4, it took them 7 more rounds to round 11 to get their next win, and they managed to beat Cronulla Sharks 13-10 at Endeavour Field, which was Cronulla's home ground at the time. It's basically just Shark Park. It was called Endeavour Field at the time, but that was Penrith's first ever away win. So 1967 round 11, Penrith over Cronulla 13-10 at Endeavour Field. So there you go. So yeah, at least I suppose finding ways to do something sometimes. And then another monstrous upset at Penrith Park. This time, 1967 around 14, Penrith somehow managed to knock off heavyweights Manly 10 points to 8 at Penrith Park. Now, Manly hadn't won 11 straight grand finals. They hadn't actually won any grand finals yet in 1967. But they were always like one of their top 4 teams, one of the heavyweights at that point in time. So Penrith, pulling off their second gigantic upset of the year, beating Manly 10 points to 8, 1967 around 14 at Penrith Park. Then, believe it or not 1 but 2 draws, both 12-all. 2 12-all draws. Absolutely in the space of 3 weeks. Which I absolutely can't believe. In round 16, 1967, Penrith a 12-all draw with North at Penrith Park, so their first ever draw at home. And then in round 18, another 12-all draw, this time with versus the Old Sydney Sports Ground. So their first ever away draw. What's the side just for this one? And the Old Sydney Sports Ground, if you're wondering what that is, that's basically just Allianz Stadium. At the time, the stadium there was called the Sydney Sports Ground. It was a different stadium that faced the opposite direction. Eventually it got bulldozed to make way for the old SFS and for these days Allianz Stadium. And then, in round 22, just to finish the year on a happy note, the last regular season game, Penrith this time beat Cronulla again, 22 points to 5 at Penrith Park, and that guaranteed that Penrith would avoid the spoon and that Cronulla would get it for 1967. So, most of Penrith's season struggled, but the 7 games I just mentioned where they got some competition points, definitely, a lot to like about those performances. A lot indeed, and they managed to pass the wooden spoon to the nearest adult, which was Cronulla Sharks. But like I just said, this was not a sign of good things to come. Like this, the fact that they played well at times in 1967, it was not at all a sign of good things to come. They got the wooden spoon not long later, in 1973, struggled throughout the 1970s, got the wooden spoon again in 1980, didn't make the finals for the first time until 1985. So there you go. Your boy all day, your 47 AM pop-off. Thank you so much for watching all the way through to the end, so you didn't miss any bone-crunching rugby league information. And thank you so much all day for that bone-crunching, genital grinding, bowel-wrecking, brutal support. Your boy all day, DL47. Roosters up next. Toodaloo.